Can Simpson-Bowles save Social Security? I'm Taylor Kinsler, and this is Scholars Mate. Hello and welcome to Scholars Mate. I'm your host, Taylor Kinsler. Joining us today are Ed Lorenzen of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and Dr. Benjamin Veghte of Social Security Works. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the recent Social Security Trustees report shows there's a widespread agreement that Social Security is in financial trouble, but there is a sharp disagreement about what should be done to improve it. The Simpson-Bowles Commission proposed changes to the program as part of its 2010 debt reduction plan, but not everyone is happy about the proposals. Ed, could you briefly explain the Simpson-Bowles proposal and what it's supposed to do for Social Security?
Thanks, Taylor. It's a pleasure to be here discussing this important issue. As you mentioned, the Social Security trustees have been warning for many years that the Social Security system faces long-term fiscal imbalances and is projected to be exhausted by the 2030s, which used to seem like a long time from now, but now is rapidly approaching. And in fact, the Social Security system has been paying out more in benefits than it's been collecting in revenue since 2010, and soon will begin to rapidly draw down on the trust fund reserves, which will then be depleted by 2033 in the latest projections, at which point benefits will be cut for all beneficiaries, regardless of income, both people currently on the program as well as new beneficiaries, by 23%. And so the Simpson-Bowles Commission felt it was important to try to address that problem in advance, because the longer we wait, the tougher the choices become, and we need to give people time to plan and adjust for changes. We want to phase in changes. The Simpson-Bowles plan sought to close that shortfall through a combination of changes in benefits and increased revenues, with the changes in benefits affecting mostly the middle and higher income earners, while putting in strengthening protections and poverty protections for low income earners and the very elderly, while also increasing taxes paid by higher income earners. In total, approximately 60% of the shortfall was closed by changes in benefits and about 40% in revenues. One of the reasons why we didn't go have a greater portion of the changes from revenues is because the Simpson-Bowles plan was looking at the entire budget and proposed revenue increases in other parts on the income tax side to deal with other parts of the budget to stabilize the debt and meet other priorities. And we felt if we relied too heavily on tax increases for Social Security, it would be much harder to raise revenues for those other needs, and we needed to raise for those other purposes. But even with the benefit changes that we made in the plan, workers retiring in 2050, and I use that date because as someone who's 30 years old today, that's when they'll be retiring. In 2050, a retiree would receive benefits that are greater in inflation-adjusted terms than a retiree today, and will be receiving benefits for more years, and therefore receiving greater lifetime benefits than a current retiree. And that is true for all income groups. And for the lowest income groups, they would be receiving greater benefits than is scheduled under current law for initial benefits, and will also be receiving greater lifetime benefits than current retirees.
Now, Ben, there are some reports that they would drastically cut the benefits of the middle class if they went forward with this plan. What flaws do you think this program has?
Well, there are several problems, Taylor, with the Bowles-Simpson plan, in my view. First of all, I just wanted to point out that the funding shortfall in Social Security does exist, but it's a modest shortfall. So over the next 25 years, Social Security has enough money to pay 94% of scheduled benefits, and we have enough money to pay 84% of benefits over the next 75 years. So there's a modest funding shortfall, but it's not a major crisis. There are several reasons why the Bowles-Simpson plan is ill-advised. First of all, the premise behind the Bowles-Simpson plan is mistaken. The Bowles-Simpson Commission was designed to address the deficit, but Social Security doesn't contribute to the debt at all. Social Security has never contributed to the debt. It never will contribute to the debt because it's by its design by Franklin Roosevelt, it's walled off from the rest of the budget. Americans don't pay into Social Security through their income taxes. They pay in through their dedicated Social Security taxes every 2 weeks it's deducted from our paychecks. Americans know this, and that's the money that's put in the Social Security Trust Fund to pay benefits down the road. The Social Security's finances don't affect the finances of the rest of the government. So that's the first reason why the premise is ill-advised. Secondly, the premise behind the Commission is that Social Security is primarily a budget problem and that the policy goal should be to close the shortfall. But that's actually not the policy goal of Social Security policy. The policy goal in Social Security policy is to address retirement insecurity. You know, when Social Security was created, the poverty rate among the elderly was 50%. And through Social Security, the poverty rate has been reduced to less than 10%. Moreover, even the middle class were largely dependent on their children in retirement. And today, our seniors, middle-class seniors, can live independently and don't have to ask their children for financial support in most cases. So the policy goal, so Social Security is a solution to a problem, namely retirement insecurity. If we scale back Social Security, we're increasing the scale of that social problem, retirement insecurity, and then we'd have to solve that problem some other way, which would also cost money. The problem is the other ways to solve that problem are less effective than Social Security. Social Security solves this problem by us all paying in advance for our retirement down the road. And it's worked very well for 75 years. Defined benefit pensions are disappearing. 401ks have only been helpful to the top third of the income spectrum, and they're very unegalitarian in the way that they distribute benefits. Wealthier people get a much bigger tax deduction for their contributions than do average workers. So both defined benefit pensions and 401k plans are not a good solution to retirement insecurity. So if we scale back Social Security, how are we going to solve that problem? Thirdly, we have a retirement income crisis in this country. Today, about 2/3 of seniors get half or more of their income from Social Security, and over a third get virtually all of their income from Social Security, 90% or more. Research shows that because of wage stagnation over the last 30 years, that in the future this problem is going to get much worse. Since the 1970s, 2/3 of income gains, 2/3 of all income gains across the entire spectrum of income have gone to the top 1% of the population. Wages have stagnated for most workers. And because of that, workers are not able to save into their 401ks. Only high earners are able to save in their 401ks or IRAs. So we expect the reliance on Social Security to go up in coming decades. So now, given the retirement income crisis, it's absolutely the wrong time to cut back on Social Security. Fourthly, the Bowles-Simpson plan doesn't just cut benefits of high earners, it cuts benefits of middle class and even low earners. It would cut benefits of the median earner by 20%, and it would cut benefits of very low earners who earn on average of $11,000 a year. It would cut benefits of about 60% of people who are earning $11,000 a year over their careers. So it cuts benefits well down into among lower income workers, not just among wealthy workers. So given the retirement income crisis, we should be talking about expanding Social Security, not cutting it. Finally, the fast-tracking procedures that are embedded in the Bowles-Simpson plan, where a plan like this would go to Congress and then get passed without debate or amendments, are very undemocratic. We have a democracy. We elect people to Congress to make decisions to represent their constituents. The Bowles-Simpson Commission was made up of people, almost none of whom, I think one of them, would have had any reliance on Social Security and retirement. The rest of the commission were all very wealthy people. People who don't rely on the program shouldn't be making decisions about Social Security policy. Congress should, because Congress represents all Americans, not just the 1%. So overall, I don't think it's a promising solution. I agree we have to do something to address the shortfall. We can do more than enough by eliminating the taxable maximum and perhaps increasing payroll taxes by from 6.2 to 7.2 over 20 years. That would be 1/20th of 1% per year, a gradual increase. That would more than eliminate the shortfall over 75 years.
Ed, would you like to respond to what he said?
Well, there's a lot there to respond to, so I'll try to do so briefly. The Commission was established to deal with fiscal responsibility and reform, so not just the debts specifically, but trying to deal with the fiscal challenges facing the country. And Social Security has promised more in benefits than it can pay in revenues. That is clearly a fiscal challenge, and that the failure to address that problem is going to result in a cut in benefits of 23%. For all beneficiaries, regardless of income, the poorest as well as everyone. And so to say Social Security can't contribute to the debt, you will then also have to recognize Social Security can't pay the promised benefits. And so all the numbers that are cited about how much benefits would be cut are cuts relative to a promise that cannot be met under current law. And allowing that 23% cut to take effect would be the worst possible outcome. So when the trust fund is out there, either we're going to be cutting benefits harshly or relying on general revenues. And it's also not entirely true that Social Security has nothing to do with the rest of the budget. Roughly a third of the Social Security trust fund balance today is related to general fund transfers that are not related to payroll taxes that have been paid in. So it has been taking money from the budget. And we looked at it not just as a budget issue. We spent a lot of time looking at Social Security as a poverty protection, and we worked on strengthening the minimum benefit for low-income workers. So the benefit for low earners and very low earners would be greater under the Simpson-Bowles plan than it would be under current law. And that was very important to us. We tried to design something that was the right policy and not just to meet a fiscal goal. But we also tried to look at it as dealing with Social Security as one aspect in the entire federal budget, of recognizing that there's going to be other needs and other demands for revenues. And if we relied entirely on revenues to close the shortfall facing Social Security, then it's going to be much harder to find revenues to deal with other problems, such as the growing cost of Medicare, with the aging society, and other needs we're going to be facing.
Now, obviously, there are pros and cons with this plan. So where do you find the balance, and where do you compromise to get everyone on board?
Well, Taylor, Americans, poll after poll shows that about 2/3 to maybe 72%, around 70% of Americans are willing to pay more in Social Security taxes in order to maintain the scheduled benefits in the program, because they know that they're going to be relying on Social Security in retirement. So a balanced approach, in my view, would be to increase the revenues, let people pay more into the system, and in return maintain the scheduled benefits in retirement. Americans are willing to do that, raise the payroll tax from 6.2 to 7.2 over 20 years, a gradual increase. It's the same thing as the 401k system, except it's more equitable. What do 401ks do? They ask you to pay money into an account that you can draw down on in retirement. That's what Social Security is. You pay money into the system and you get it out in retirement. I think that would be a balanced approach.
I'd say that the Simpson-Bowles plan actually ended up becoming a balanced approach, that it was developed as part of a bipartisan commission with Democrats and Republicans, and had several Republicans who came into the process saying they didn't want to raise revenues at all, and several Democrats saying they didn't want to touch benefits at all. And looking at the challenge, and looking at the challenge of Social Security in the context of all the other challenges that this government faces, that there was a back and forth and give and take, and recognition that you needed a balanced plan that had some changes in benefits and bringing more revenues into the system. So I think that many of the Republican members felt that we had more revenues than they would have liked, may have had more changes in benefits than some of the Democrats liked, but they felt it was a fair compromise. And relying entirely on revenues may not be politically possible. I think you need to be willing to have give and take to compromise, and also you're not having revenues for other purposes. The revenue increases that you're talking about to eliminating the cap and raising the payroll tax would be a tax increase of about 10% as a share of the economy when it's fully in effect. That's a massive tax increase, about 7 times the fiscal cliff deal. Enacting a tax increase of that magnitude is going to be very difficult to do politically, and even if we did, it would be very hard, if not impossible, to come back and raise revenues for any other purpose, and I think that there are other needs for which we would need to be raising taxes as well. So I think a balanced plan should be looking at both sides of the equation, recognizing that people are living longer, so we can have a slight increase in retirement age. They still be receiving benefits and spending more years in retirement than they do today, but maybe not quite as much, and slowing the growth of benefits, so they'd be getting more benefits than a current worker does, but not quite as much more as a current worker does. And you can do that while still providing strong, if not stronger, protections for the most vulnerable in society through a stronger minimum benefit and other changes.
Now, some critics have said that Simpson-Bowles would hinder the link between benefits and earnings over the years, and that ultimately everyone would end up earning the same amount, despite individual wages. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, we were very conscious of making sure you preserve the link between contribution benefits. That there are some people who have proposed eliminating the cap on taxable on wages that are subject to taxes, but not crediting benefits. Social Security works to their credit, does not do that, and recognizes there should be a link between contribution and benefits. At the same time, we did try to make changes in the benefit formula to make it more progressive and to make the greater reductions in the benefit formula for high-income workers. So for a high-income worker, the amount that they're getting back for additional dollar paid in Social Security taxes is going to be less than it is today, and flatten the benefits somewhat. I think that was a necessary trade-off that needed to be made. It does flatten the benefits, but you're still getting some additional benefits for additional dollars being paid in. But we're asking the wealthier both to pay more and get less back in benefits as a result.
Ben, what do you think?
Taylor, I think that's an excellent question, and I know that Ed has a conscientious approach to this issue and is trying to address a range of fiscal challenges thoughtfully. But there are people for whom there's a long-term strategy on the right to eliminate Social Security. George Bush tried to privatize it in 2005. And progressive price indexing, which is part of this plan, would basically take the benefit that the current high earners get and reduce it to that which average earners get today. So today, high earners get maybe $29,000 a year, the highest earners, and the average worker gets $15,000 a year in benefits. And the Bowles-Simpson plan would reduce everyone above the mean would get only $15,000. So for anyone who earns more, the median earner earns about $47,000 a year. So for everyone who earns more than $47,000 a year, Social Security would become a really bad deal. They'd be paying a lot more than they were getting out. And over time, that would reduce political support for the program because it would sever the link between contributions and benefits. And then 10 or 20 years from now, when the next Republican president tries to privatize the program, it will be a lot easier to achieve that goal because most voters won't be seeing the program as beneficial to them the way they do today. So this is a step on the path to eliminating Social Security altogether. I know that's not Ed's intention, but I think that would be a policy consequence. There's a term in political science that says programs for the poor are poor programs. I mean, look what happened to AFDC. It was eliminated. Welfare, as we know it, was eliminated, and now it's a shell of its former self. That could happen to Social Security as well if we allow Bowles-Simpson to go into effect.
I think it's a question, though, of what's the best use of limited resources and where we should be making changes. That if we were to take the Social Security Works plan where you're eliminating the tax on capital, cap on wages that are subject to taxes, and continue providing benefits of those, a millionaire would receive, in 2050, would get, for an individual, $1.1 million more in Social Security benefits over their lifetime, and a couple $1.7 million in additional benefits. I think if we're going to be raising taxes on upper-income taxpayers, the question is how much of that additional taxes we're raising should we be going back and giving back to the same upper-income people versus having those for other needs. I agree there should be a link. I agree that we should not break that link between benefits and taxes, and many the critics of Simpson-Bowles said we should just eliminate the cap on wages and not credit benefits, and that would solve the problem, but it would, as you say, undercut the program, and that's an important concern. But I think that having some reductions in the benefits at the top level is an important way to prioritize the use of our resources.
I think this is another example of the problem with Social Security policy being made by a commission of people who are not social insurance experts. It misunderstands how social insurance works. Social insurance there's a direct link between what you contribute and what you get back, and if you cut off the wealthy from that linkage, the program will lose political support over time.
The people, I and others on the staff who worked on the Simpson-Bowles Commission are very conscious of the social insurance features of the program and maintaining those. And in fact, the replacement rate for people at the top under the Simpson-Bowles plan is greater than the replacement rate under the Social Security Works plan. And the Social Security Works plan has a surcharge on millionaires with no benefits accrued to that. So if the goal is to be preserving the social insurance nature of the program and avoiding having taxes on wealthy individuals that are not being credited to benefits, the Simpson-Bowles plan is much better from that perspective. Both plans are asking people high income to pay more in taxes and get some, but not a great deal of benefits in return, and keeping the social insurance principles. But I think if you're concerned about social insurance principles, the Simpson-Bowles plan is actually much stronger in that goal than the Social Security Works plan.
Well, I'd like to remind our audience at home that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air during the end of the show. And I think we're going to switch topics now. Let's take some questions from our viewers. All right. Our first question is from Brian McBride, and his question is Simpson-Bowles the closest we'll ever come to a bipartisan budget deal? Anyone want to start?
Yeah. So first of all, I would just like to say that Simpson-Bowles was a compromise between wealthy Democrats and wealthy Republicans who are not elected. Wealthy unelected Republicans and wealthy unelected Democrats. To me, that is not that may be bipartisan in a technical sense. It's not even really bipartisan because it's not. It's not made completely of members of Congress from both parties. It's made of a lot of appointed members as well. I mean, it should be elected representatives who make these decisions. And the point really isn't whether they're Democrats or Republicans. The point should be, are they representing the people who pay into the program? Average workers pay into the program. People making $20,000 a year, $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 a year, they pay into the program. It's their program. It's their defined benefit pension. For many, it's all they'll have in retirement. They should be making decisions about its future through their elected representatives. It shouldn't be left to a committee of wealthy, bipartisan experts.
The Simpson-Bowles plan had support across the spectrum. It had elected members of Congress on the commission and had support from elected members of Congress on the commission, ranging from Dick Durbin, a very strong, proud, progressive Democrat from Illinois, and Tom Coburn, a very strong, proud, conservative Republican from Oklahoma. So it's not fair to say it was unelected representatives. And those who worked on the staff were also very aware of it. I personally benefited from Social Security survivors benefits as a child. Both my parents, mother and stepfather, benefited from Social Security disability insurance. And so those of us who worked on it at staff level, as well as the members of the commission who worked on it, were very cognizant of the importance of the program. And it was a bipartisan compromise of people trying to take and reflect not just their own personal views, but I think the members of Congress and the other appointed members of the commission tried to take and reflect the views of their constituents and the importance of the program as a whole. And it was a bipartisan compromise that tried to balance competing needs. It was not perfect. I think everyone could find things in there they would change. Dick Durbin said there were things in there he hated as much as the devil hated holy water. And frankly, having looked at some of the issues since the commission report came out, there are ways that we've identified that it could be changed and improved to work better. But it was a missed opportunity because for a brief moment you had a bipartisan compromise that had tough choices that people on both sides really had to swallow hard, but trying to find a solution, knowing that you're not going to get 100% of your own way to get a deal. And if you go into trying to deal with the problem saying, we're not going to raise taxes at all, or we're not going to touch benefits at all, you're not going to get a solution. And you take that approach, the end result is inaction, and you end up with either an across-the-board cut in benefits for everyone, or you end up having to bail out the program with general revenues and you end its nature as a social insurance program, both of which results would be a disaster. So the compromise in which you're giving some is far better than the consequences of inaction.
Okay. Our next question is from Maureen Wilson, and she said, could you comment on Chile's retirement system and whether it's a good model to imitate?
We didn't really look at the Chile system very much in the Simpson-Bowles Commission. It's not a good model for a lot of reasons. That Chile didn't have an established retirement program with as much of an established nature and benefit promises that the U.S. system has. And frankly, if the Social Security system were still running surpluses, it might be easier to talk about whether you should be saving those surpluses in individual accounts. The Social Security system today is running cash deficits. And so even many of those who had supported that type of approach in the past no longer do so.
Well, there are all kinds of problems with individual account systems. The purpose of Social Security is to have a strong foundation for retirement security. If you have individual accounts, none of us know how long we're going to live, right? So we don't know how many years those benefits we're going to need money for. If you live to 75, you need much less money than if you live to 95. None of us know how long we're going to live. We don't know if we're going to get hit by a bus at some point and need disability benefits. There are a lot of, we don't know if you had private accounts in America, pretty quickly Congress would make sure that people were allowed to withdraw from those accounts for things like buying a home or paying for college for their children. There would be exceptions like there are for the 401k system, and there would be so much leakage that by retirement people wouldn't have much money left for their retirement. So that model doesn't really work well for retirement security.
All right, and now our guests will get to ask questions to each other directly. Who would like to start?
If I may,
certainly.
I'd just like to ask you. So what is your solution to the retirement income crisis? If given the defined benefit pensions aren't working and the 401k system is only helping the top third of earners significantly, if you cut Social Security by say 20% for the average earner, is $15,000 a year enough for middle-class families to live on in retirement?
Well, again, first of all, I would say that, remind you that even under Simpson-Bowles, benefits in adjusted for inflation would still be greater for future retirees than they are today. So you're going to be seeing greater Social Security benefits, and so Social Security will be providing a greater amount of income in real inflation-adjusted terms than it would be today. But I do think that we need to be looking at our retirement system and our upside-down retirement system in terms of tax incentives. That right now, our tax system does provide much greater incentive and benefits for retirement savings for higher income earners than it does for low income earners, and that we should be looking at trying to change that. So the Simpson-Bowles on the tax reform recommendations proposed capping and limiting the amount of tax benefits for wealthier individuals to save, and you could use some of those savings to be providing greater tax incentives to be saving at the bottom end. And if you're doing that along with strengthening the safety net features of Social Security, and encouraging people to save generally on their own, more on their own, that those who aren't able to save, we should be strengthening Social Security benefits for those low-income earners who aren't able to save. For others, we should be providing incentives and ability and encouraging them to be saving more. So I guess for my question, I would say that if you're closing the entire Social Security shortfall through taxes and expanding benefits in some places and paying for that with increased taxes, that's a pretty significant tax increase. The Simpson-Bowles plan had tax increases to pay for other priorities. Do you believe that if we raise taxes entirely to close Social Security, that we'd be able to find revenues to be able to meet other needs and priorities?
I do. Our tax levels as a percent of GDP are among the lowest they've been since the 1950s. Taxes we had great economic growth during the Clinton years when the tax rates were much higher than they are today. And then in 2001 and 2003, we had two massive tax cuts that worth over $2.3 trillion that put a big hole in the deficit, which is in the federal budget, added to our debt, which is why we had the Bowles-Simpson Commission in the first place, was because of those massive tax cuts and two unfunded wars. We don't need to solve that problem by cutting seniors' retirement benefits or those of the disabled. Moreover, Americans in poll after poll say they're willing to pay more into Social Security in order to maintain scheduled benefits. It's their defined benefit pension. It's very much analogous to a 401k plan. People are willing to put money into their 401k because they know they're going to need that money when they retire. With Social Security, people are willing to put money into Social Security in order to get that money when they retire. That's not a tax like other taxes. It's retirement saving, but through a much more efficient system than a 401k system, and a much more equitable system than the 401k system. So I don't see that. It's a special kind of contribution towards your own retirement. It's not comparable to other taxes. Moreover, because over the last 30 years, 2/3 of income gains have gone to the top 1% of the population, where everyone else's income is either maintained or declined. In fact, if you count declines to the lower income groups, the top 1% has gotten 87% of all overall income shifts over the last 30 years. That top 1% can afford to give some of that back in taxes. They got massive tax cuts in 2001, 2003. I think they can more than afford to pay a little bit back to replenish the holes in our budget that were created by tax cuts over the last 15 years. So I don't lose sleep over that. I think the most important thing is to maintain retirement security for American seniors. Cutting benefits now in the midst of a retirement income crisis, I think, is the wrong way to go.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if we'll find common ground here, but it's now time for We Agree, where each of our guests will say a component of each other's argument that they agree with. So start with you.
Well, I agree with Ed that we need to take action soon on Social Security. And I also agree with him that we should maintain the link between contributions and benefits. Those are 2 points we both agreed on. The earlier that we take action to address the shortfall, the less of a burden it will be on contributions, and the less radical the changes would need to be. So we disagree in that I believe we should raise revenues more, he believes we should cut benefits more, but we agree that we have to act quickly.
And I would say I agree on both of those points, those areas of agreement, and maintaining the link between contribution and benefits is important. And I would also say I think we both agree that there should be higher taxes on the wealthy, and the difference is just how much of that increase in taxes on the wealthy should be going to Social Security versus how going to meet other priorities facing our nation.
Okay. I have one final question for both of you. So through Simpson-Bowles, what improvements do you hope to see for Social Security in the next 10 years?
Well, I think I would like to see changes made in sooner than 10 years that would be able to gradually phase in changes to make the program solvent over 75 years and bring revenues and spending in line, while at the same time strengthening the poverty protections of the program. And that the reason to act sooner than later is that you want to be able to phase those changes and gradually give people time to change and to avoid disruptions, whether it be on the benefits and giving people time to plan and adjust for those changes, or on revenue changes. And we need to enact those soon, both to avoid them becoming larger, because the choices will get tougher, but to give people time to plan. And I think we should all, at the same time, can do so while we're strengthening benefits from the bottom side, which is one of the places where we've found ways to make the Simpson-Bowles plan even better after additional work.
Same question for you as well, but do you think that Simpson-Bowles can be successful?
No, I can't. It would cause a revolution in America. I mean, that's why they fast track it, so that nobody can modify it, and they try to force it through Congress. No, American people would revolt, because people would get old and be, it's our parents and when we get old, end up living with our children, being dependent on our children. American people do not support a solution to Social Security that cuts benefits.
Okay. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today, and we'll end it here with this topic. Thank you to our guests for joining us today and contributing to the debate, and thank you to everyone watching at home. We'll see you next time.